Imagine a story so powerful, so ancient, and so full of mystery that it still echoes through every corner of the modern world. From the hills of Ethiopia to the forests of the Americas, from dusty scrolls to futuristic prophecies. This isn't just about history, it's about identity, destiny, and a legacy long forgotten, but never truly lost. This is the tale of the 10 lost tribes of Israel, not just a biblical footnote, but a living enigma. A spiritual mystery that weaves its way through centuries of exile and survival, stirring the hearts of seekers, scholars, and saints alike. Why do so many groups, across continents and cultures, claim descent from these tribes? Why does it matter? And could their reappearance signal something far more profound, even prophetic? To understand the mystery, we must first return to the very roots of the story, to a man named Jacob, later called Israel. He was no stranger to struggle. In fact, his life was defined by it, none more dramatic than the night he wrestled with a divine being and refused to let go until he received a blessing. That moment marked the birth of a nation. Jacob had 12 sons, each with a distinct personality, each destined to become the father of a tribe. Their names, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin, echo through Scripture. Joseph notably became two tribes through his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Each tribe carried a purpose, a prophecy, a place in the story of God's people. These tribes weren't just family. They were a living blueprint for a nation, a people bound not just by blood, but by covenant. Under David and Solomon, the tribes briefly united in a golden age. One kingdom, one temple, one vision. But human hearts are fragile, and unity gave way to division. The kingdom split. 10 tribes formed the northern kingdom of Israel, while 2 remained in the south as Judah. Over time, the northern tribes were conquered, scattered, and vanished. Or did they? This is where the mystery deepens. For centuries, whispers of the lost tribes have surfaced in the most unexpected places. In the oral histories of African communities, in the customs of tribes in India, in the legends of the Americas. They speak of ancient journeys, sacred laws, and a memory of belonging, of once being part of something greater. Are these scattered people the remnants of Israel, or are they spiritual echoes drawn to a story that mirrors their own? The prophets spoke of a day when God would gather his people from the four corners of the earth, a grand homecoming, a reunion of tribes once thought gone forever. Could the fulfillment of that prophecy be closer than we think? But this isn't just about genetics or geography. The story of the tribes is about purpose. It's about how unity can be forged from diversity. Each tribe had its own strengths. Levi's spiritual leadership, Judah's royal lineage, Joseph's resilience and fruitfulness. Their differences weren't a weakness. They were a design. Think of them as parts of a body, as Paul later described the church. Different roles, one mission, one heartbeat. That same truth echoes today. God's kingdom was never meant to be uniform. It was meant to be unified in purpose, diverse in expression, and the leadership lessons are just as timeless. David brought unity through humility and vision. Solomon, for all his wisdom, allowed division to grow through compromise. Their stories hold up a mirror to modern leaders, from kings to CEOs, and ask, what kind of legacy are you building? The tribes may be ancient, but their relevance is anything but outdated. In Revelation, we see them again, sealed, counted, and part of the final chapter. Their return isn't just about reclaiming a past. It's about stepping into a destiny that affects the whole world. And maybe, just maybe, it's about us too. Because this isn't just their story. It's our story, a story of wandering and return, of brokenness and healing, of searching for a place to belong in a world that often feels fractured. In the end, the question isn't only, where did the tribes go? The real question is, where do we belong? And perhaps the answer lies not in bloodlines or borders, but in covenant, in choosing to be part of something bigger than ourselves, to be woven into a divine tapestry that spans generations, continents, and destinies. There was once a kingdom, forged in unity, crowned in glory, but destined to fracture. Under Kings David and Solomon, the 12 tribes of Israel stood together. A people once enslaved had become a beacon of purpose, a kingdom aligned with divine will. But peace is a fragile thing. When Solomon's reign ended, so too did the unity of Israel. Cracks became divides, and those divides became kingdoms. The once united tribes split in two, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. What followed was one of the most tragic and mysterious chapters in biblical history. The northern kingdom, 10 tribes strong, turned from the God who had delivered them. Despite the presence of prophets, despite the warnings, they began to chase other gods, other customs, other paths. The prophets Hosea and Amos cried out like voices in a storm, calling the people back to righteousness. But their cries were swallowed by rebellion and pride. And then, judgment came. In 722 BC, the Assyrian Empire swept through the land with terrifying force. But conquest was not their only weapon. Displacement was. The Assyrians didn't just defeat kingdoms. They dismantled them from the inside out. Populations were uprooted, scattered across foreign lands, severed from their heritage and from one another. The northern tribes were taken to Hala, to Gozan, to distant corners of the empire. The records grow silent, names fade, and thus were born the lost tribes of Israel. But what does that actually mean? This wasn't just the loss of territory, it was the slow unraveling of identity. A people bound by covenant were now broken, blended into the empires that had taken them. Over time, the distinctiveness of each tribe blurred into myth. Their political autonomy, their cultural uniqueness, their spiritual legacy all began to fade. This is more than ancient history, it's a mirror. Because the story of the Northern Kingdom is a story of ignoring the warning signs. It's a story of what happens when we trade foundational values for fleeting pleasures. In the modern world, we've seen this same pattern. Governments, corporations, even families falling apart not from lack of knowledge, but from lack of accountability. Think of a company that once stood for integrity. Over time, corners get cut, voices of concern are silenced, profits become more important than principles. Scandals erupt, collapse follows. The tragedy isn't sudden, it's a slow erosion of the soul, just like Israel. And the prophets? They're still speaking, only now they sound like whistleblowers, concerned mentors, or that quiet voice in your conscience. And still, too often, they're ignored. The Assyrian conquest teaches us something chilling. Exile doesn't always look like chains and prisons. Sometimes it looks like forgetting who you are. To be scattered isn't just about geography, it's about identity. The Israelites in exile didn't just lose their land, they lost their story. And when you lose your story, you lose your way. But even in exile, even in silence, not all was lost. Enter the Beta Israel, the Jews of Ethiopia. For centuries, this community clung to ancient traditions that mirrored the laws of Moses. They observed the Sabbath. They followed kosher dietary laws. They circumcised their sons on the 8th day. They spoke of a lineage tracing back to the tribe of Dan, one of those so-called lost tribes. What makes their story remarkable isn't just their claim, it's their endurance. Cut off from mainstream Judaism, surrounded by different cultures and pressures, the Beta Israel still held fast to their identity. They built their lives on memory and faith, even when the world forgot them. In the 20th century, their story took an extraordinary turn. Operations Moses, 1984, and Solomon, 1991, saw thousands of Ethiopian Jews airlifted to Israel, a modern-day exodus. Families were reunited with the land of their ancestors. Prayers whispered over centuries were finally answered. For many, this was more than a homecoming. It was prophecy in motion. It was a spark of hope, a sign that the scattering of Israel might not end in silence, but in return. And for the rest of us, their story is a lesson in perseverance. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase." The Beta Israel took that step, generation after generation, in darkness. with no assurance that anyone would recognize their faith, their heritage, or their claim. But they kept walking. Their survival reminds us of a greater truth, that identity, when rooted in faith, can withstand even the fiercest storms. So we return to the scattered tribes, the northern kingdom, and the warnings of ancient prophets. This isn't just about who we descend from, it's about who we choose to become. Are we listening to the warnings? Are we staying true to our foundational values? Or are we, like the 10 tribes, in danger of becoming lost, not in geography, but in purpose? The scattering of Israel is a warning, yes, but also an invitation to remember, to return, to rebuild, not just as nations, but as people, as souls, as stories that still matter. What if your ancestors were shipwrecked on a foreign shore, thousands of miles from home, yet clung to their identity so fiercely that centuries later, their descendants still remembered who they were? This is not a legend. It's the living history of the Beni Israel, a small Jewish community nestled in the western regions of India. Their story begins, as many great ones do, in uncertainty. According to their oral tradition, their ancestors were part of the tribe of Ephraim, one of the so-called lost tribes of Israel. They say a storm cast their ship ashore, far from Jerusalem, far from their homeland, and yet somehow they survived. More than that, they remembered. For generations, the Bene Israel lived in quiet isolation. No temples, no rabbis, no scrolls, just memory and faith. They kept the Sabbath. They observed dietary laws. They circumcised their sons on the 8th day. These traditions were passed down not by scholars, but by farmers, merchants, and mothers. Over time, they wove their Jewish faith into the rich tapestry of Indian culture, creating a harmony of identity that defied both time and distance. Their story isn't just a historical curiosity, it's a lesson, a reminder that identity doesn't need to be loud to be lasting. It doesn't need fanfare to be faithful. Just as Mahatma Gandhi embraced India's spiritual traditions while calling for unity across religions and castes, the Bene Israel offer a model of balance, of how you can preserve who you are while living in harmony with those around you. Their quiet strength asks us a simple question: how can we stay rooted in our heritage while embracing the world around us? But they are not alone. Across the mountains of Afghanistan and Pakistan, the Pashtun people, sometimes called Pathans, tell a strikingly similar story. Numbering in the tens of millions, many among them claim descent from the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, the sons of Joseph. These are not just tales of ancestry. Their customs, passed down through generations, often reflect ancient Israelite practices. Many Pashtun families circumcise their sons on the 8th day. Many avoid pork. In their oral traditions, they refer to themselves as Bani Israel, the children of Israel. Do all scholars agree on their origins? Number. But that's not the point. The real power of their story lies in their resilience. In a region shaped by war, tribalism, and religious pressure, the idea that a people could hold on to an identity for thousands of years, even if only in part, is remarkable. It brings to mind another daughter of the Pashtun people, Malala Yousafzai. Shot for going to school, she became a global voice for education and justice. Like her people's ancient story, Malala shows us that identity, when rooted deeply enough, can weather storms, bullets, and generations of silence. So why do these stories matter? Because they point to something larger than ethnicity or ancestry. They point to a prophecy, an ancient promise, that the scattered people of Israel would one day return. The prophet Ezekiel saw this vision. In Ezekiel 37, he stands in a valley filled with dry bones, a graveyard of forgotten dreams and broken people. And God asks him, can these bones live? It's a question not just about bones, but about hope. Ezekiel begins to speak, and suddenly the bones rattle. They rise, they are clothed in flesh, they breathe, they live. This is the promise, that what seems dead and scattered can be restored. That identity, purpose, and calling can be resurrected, not by human effort, but by the Spirit of God. The lost tribes of Israel, thought to be erased by history, are in this vision destined for revival. Isaiah 11:12 speaks of a day when God will raise a banner for the nations, and gather the exiles of Israel from the four corners of the earth. It's a picture of divine reconciliation, a gathering not just of tribes, but of hearts, broken things made whole again. We see echoes of this prophecy in modern events. In the 1980s and 90s, Israel carried out Operation Moses and Operation Solomon, airlifting thousands of Ethiopian Jews, the Beta Israel, to safety and homecoming. After centuries of isolation, their dream of returning to Zion came true. We see this banner for the nations raised in their hands, not as a flag, but as a promise kept. This divine regathering contrasts with our human efforts at unity, noble but fragile. After the horrors of World War II, the United Nations was born, a vision of peace among nations. Yet peace, as we know, is elusive. The gathering of Israel is different. It's not built on treaties or politics. It's built on covenant, on promise, on God's word. Think of Winston Churchill rallying nations against tyranny in World War II. He embodied the kind of leadership that unites divided peoples. In the same way, and but on a far greater scale, the Messiah is foretold to bring true unity, gathering the tribes under one king. A kingdom not of this world, but of divine justice and peace. And still, the story continues. The Bene Israel of India, now largely relocated to Israel, continue to carry their dual heritage, Jewish in faith, Indian in flavor. They are a living bridge between worlds. Their songs, foods, and customs reflect the strength of a people who refuse to forget who they were, even when the world did. The Pashtuns, whether descended from Israel or not, remind us of a deeper truth, that lineage is not only about blood, but about story, about the values, dreams, and faith we inherit and choose to carry forward. So we are left with a question. Are we carrying forward the identity we've been given? Do we know where we come from? Not just in geography, but in purpose? Because maybe we are all in some way scattered, lost in busyness, lost in confusion, lost in a world that pulls us away from what matters. But the good news is this: the same God who called dry bones to live is still calling today. And he's calling us not just to remember, but to return to purpose, to return to identity, to return to him. What if your story didn't end with exile? What if everything lost, identity, purpose, even people, could be found again? The journey of the lost tribes of Israel isn't just a tale from the past. It's a mirror held up to every heart and every nation that's ever wandered, broken, or hoped for something more. It begins with scattering. After the reign of Solomon, Israel split. The northern kingdom turned away from its covenant with God, choosing idols over identity, rebellion over relationship. Prophets like Hosea and Amos warned them, begged them to return, but they refused. So came the fall. In 722 BC, Assyria conquered the northern tribes. The people were uprooted, displaced, scattered across foreign lands. Their names faded from records. Their tribes, once proud, became what we now call the lost tribes of Israel. But that's only the beginning, because this story is not about being lost. It's about being found. Against all odds, small communities have held on to whispers of who they were: the Beta Israel of Ethiopia, the Pashtuns of Afghanistan and Pakistan, the Bene Israel of India. These are not just people groups. They are living echoes of something ancient, something sacred. They carried fragments of Jewish faith and practice through war, isolation, poverty, and persecution. They held on to memory, onto identity, onto hope. And in modern times, we've seen them reemerge, not as relics, but as part of a bigger story still unfolding. Figures like Malala Yousafzai, a Pashtun woman fighting for education and justice, remind us that identity can flourish even in hostile environments. Her courage is not just personal, it's cultural, it's prophetic, a reminder that roots run deep, and when nurtured, they rise. Nelson Mandela spent decades in a prison cell, but he emerged with a vision that united a broken nation. His life speaks of restoration, much like the tribes who will one day return, not just to a land, but to a calling. These modern stories reflect ancient truths. As Romans 11:33 declares, "Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God! How unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond tracing out." God's plan is not always obvious, but it is always unfolding. Through prophets like Ezekiel and Isaiah, we are given glimpses of what's to come. Ezekiel's valley of dry bones, lifeless, hopeless, is suddenly filled with breath and purpose, a scattered people brought back to life. Isaiah 49:6 says, "I will also make you a light for the nations, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth." This is not just for Israel. This is for all of us. The return of the lost tribes is not just about geography. It's about grace, not just about ethnicity, but about eternity. Think of Mahatma Gandhi, a man who crossed religious and cultural boundaries to lead with truth and love. His life reminds us that some stories speak to every heart, regardless of nation or creed. The story of the lost tribes is one of those. Revelation 7 paints a vision of the future, of 144,000 sealed from every tribe, standing before God, joined by a multitude no one can count. Every tribe, every tongue, every nation. This is not fantasy. This is destiny. A world restored, a people united, a God who never breaks his promises. But the story doesn't stop with them. It asks you a question. Where do you fit in this narrative? Because this is more than a story to admire. It's a call to action, a call to return, to believe, to take your place in the work of redemption God is still doing today. Maybe you feel scattered by life, by fear, by doubt. Maybe you've lost your sense of purpose or connection or faith. But just like the tribes, you are not forgotten. You are not too far. You are not beyond restoration. Let their survival inspire your own. Let their faith through exile remind you that no storm can erase what God has planted in you. Let their reemergence remind you that what seems lost can be found again. Like a field of scattered seeds, now blooming in unison, the tribes whisper to us of hope, of destiny, of a promise still alive. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." And we might add, the arc of God's redemptive plan bends toward restoration. So, will you step into that story? Will you become part of the reconciliation of tribes, of families, of hearts? Because this is not just their story. It's ours. It's a call, and it echoes into eternity.